Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Chatting the Pictures. I'm Cara Finnegan, and I'm a writer, teacher, and historian of photography.
And I'm Michael Shaw, the publisher of Reading the Pictures.
So here we are, Michael. It's State of the Union week, delayed. Super Bowl week. We have a variety of political images of all kinds today, as always.
Yeah, I guess you could say the State of the Union was worth the wait.
Yeah, visually speaking, there's certainly enough to engage all of the senses, but perhaps especially the eyes as well. So let's start with that, with our first segment, the news, where we look at how news photos tell a story. And this photo that we started with is certainly one that made some news the last few days.
Yeah, it certainly did. It was taken by the brilliant Doug Mills for New York Times. He was shooting for the pool. And I have to say, this caption is just flat out deadpan the way it works out. Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Vice President Mike Pence applaud U.S. President Donald Trump at the State of the Union address in the chamber of the U.S. House of Representatives at the U.S. Capitol building on February 5th, 2019 in Washington, D.C. And I guess we could also say that news photo-wise, this picture is going to probably end up in the Body Language Hall of Fame.
Please tell me there is such a thing. I want to visit it often.
Yes. And I'm sure there's a lot of competition, but, hands down, that people called it the clap back, the shade clap, the hate clap, the FU clap. When we were live tweeting, we said we're not clapping for you. I'm not clapping for you. I'm clapping at you. And just for a little bit of context, this happened when Trump was talking about, he kind of goes, there's the happy, loving, preamble to like all the hate that comes after.
Right, and then, the unity bit.
Yeah, and then at the end he kind of goes back to like, the light. And so he was saying something to the effect of, we must reject the politics of revenge, resistance and retribution, and embrace the boundless potential of cooperation, compromise, and the common good. So this was Nancy's response.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you watch the video clip and you see her kind of get up and do this, what the first thing that strikes me is not that she claps that way, but that Trump turns around to look at her specifically. So he is basically, it appears, I wouldn't call it an aggressive move, but he's checking to see if, look, I said a statement about unity. Are you noticing? Are you standing up? And then she, along with Pence, right, and many other people in the chamber, stand. But then that's the gesture she uses. And I think that's really interesting because in some ways, sometimes you can say, oh, well, a news photo is taken out of context and it's just one little freeze frame and the video is totally different if you watch it. And to me, Mills's photo here kind of amplifies that moment, which is, Trump's not turning around because she called his attention. He's turning around because he expects her attention, and then that's her response. And so, yeah, the Body Language Hall of Fame all the way, for sure, playing out here and just that interaction. And so, to me, even though Pelosi's like, well, please notice the context. I was clapping for a good thing. I was, this was not meant to be sarcastic. The body language still plays out as, yes, I am clapping, right? And I note for the record, too, that Doug Mills has a black and white version of this on his Instagram where he captioned, I assume it's him doing his own Instagram captions, I could be wrong, but he captioned it that she claps towards President Trump, which is another example of the litany that you gave, right? Is she clapping for him? Is she clapping at him? So it's this dynamic, right? This is an image that moves, even though it's a still photo, which I just think is really interesting.
Yeah, you're right. In this case, it's not reading in at all. She has been a powerful antagonist of Trump's from the night that the Democrats won back the House. She stood up to him. She canceled the State of the Union because of the shutdown. This is personal, and she made a calculated decision to basically resist him non-verbally the entire night. She's reading the transcript instead of listening to him, pursing her lips, egging on the House Democratic women when he basically was patronizing them, and then her encouragement of them kind of then turned his recognition back on him. And then what's also interesting, we did a tweet the day before the State of the Union wondering how the dynamics might work with Pelosi behind Trump. We kind of anticipated this. And what we mentioned in that tweet was the famous images of Trump stalking Hillary in that August 2017 debate in St. Louis. So, this is what turnabout is fair play, or, just desserts. But, this is literally like watch your back.
Yeah. She's lurking behind him. I thought about that too. Yeah. And, thinking about kind of body position and, how she's behind him and watch your back and all of that. The other thing I think with the way the image is framed here in this, there's a couple other versions that are cropped down where it's just more of almost a kind of a 2+ Pence shot of the two of them. But the way this image plays out, I interpret it spatially as it's Nancy's world and the rest of us are all just visiting. She is her. If you look at the edges of the frame is where the other figures are, who all happen to be men. At least they read to me as men.
That's right.
The men in the foreground, and then obviously Pence and the president. And there's a lot of space around her. And of course, she's dressed in white, which was the homage to the suffrage movement, and the other Democratic women were similarly dressed. Yeah. And so what is also
going on there.
Yeah, and just from a visual perspective, one of the things that makes this image, memeable and gifable and all of the various ways that people are and will continue to treat it is because she is sort of isolated at the same time that, as we talked about, there's this really interesting nonverbal interaction going on. So you can draw a pretty big circle around this photo and no one's in it but Nancy Pelosi.
Well, she's quite powerful, and she's taking aim. And in the name of the state, the three of them, with Pence doing that kind of, apologetic blue tie, is kind of red, white, and blue against red, white, and blue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah, it was quite a moment, quite an image.
Yeah, and yeah, I feel like in the retrospectives of her career, whenever those emerge, this will probably be a visual point.
How?
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked already about a lot of the visual aspects of the previous image, but we'll now move formally to our segment that we call The Look. And this is a segment where we look at photos that are pushing the visual boundaries to tell a news story in a particularly dramatic way. And here's this week's look.
Yeah, John Moore, we've looked at him a lot. He is one of the lead photographers on the immigration story. He's been on the border literally for almost a decade. And it's interesting, especially for Instagram, to see such an extended caption, and really is very helpful in terms of context. And by the way, this is the first of a 10 photo post on Instagram. And half of those pictures deal with this double wall. The caption reads, Central American immigrants waited a double mesh border fence after crossing the Rio Grande from Mexico to El Paso. They said they had crossed the river the evening before and waited by the fence overnight with temperatures at about 40 degrees. After arriving to American soil, the families are taken into custody by U.S. border agents to then request political asylum. Because the river there is shallow, many wade across it instead of entering Texas via an official port of entry, or many have to wait weeks or months to receive an asylum interview. And then he finishes, U.S. border officials limit the number of immigrants that can pass through ports of entry on a daily basis, a process called metering.
The whole series of images that Moore has posted to Instagram more recently, folks should really take a look at the whole series. I think, Michael, you're right that they provide they provide some visual context for the other images as well. The thing that just visually strikes me about this image is just this immediate visual engagement with the people on the other side of the fence, the figure in the middle, looking directly at us, the viewer, looking directly at the camera. And then what's between us is, it's called a double mesh fence. It actually looks to me like it might be triple, or, I don't know what constitutes double mesh in this scenario. But you have both a way to see through and have a visual interaction that Moore has set up here. But then you also have, this is really a photograph that's depicting the fence and depicting the impact of the fence in a pretty material way. I mean, you almost feel like you could reach out, right, and touch that metal and kind of feel that chilly air.
It's like a photo from the underworld, and I think that what's really fabulous about John's work is that as much as we keep seeing pictures of people through fences and just so many variations on a theme, the intensity of this picture really captures where we are now. It is really like a doubling down, and it also is very relevant with Trump now, like wanting, a consummate fence or wall or more wall. I mean, this and also it speaks to how much that speaks to like Trump's the method to the madness. This confounding of the rules, essentially gaslighting migrants, where they don't quite know what the rules of the game are anymore. Sorry to refer to it as a game even, but this is both visually and psychologically represents both a doubling down politically and also a double bind, and it is grating. Sorry for like all those metaphors, but this is what pictures do, and this is what John is really amplifying.
I think that is so right on, Michael. And that notion of, like you said, doubling down, or I thought when I first saw this image about excessiveness, particularly the caption, which points out that this group of migrants that Moore was photographing had already crossed the Rio Grande. So they are, quote unquote, technically already on the other side. And yet there's this barrier that they are patiently waiting at so that they can be taken into custody. So it's both, it feels both kind of excessive, I think, in the sense of, well, they're already here. How many more fences do we need, right? But on the other hand, it's the fact that you can see through the fence, and the fact that, he's photographing people going across the Rio Grande and then waiting at the fence. And then the rest of the series of photos shows a lot of interaction, not only kind of what happens to folks after they're brought into custody, but it shows pretty one-on-one interaction with, for example, a member of the Border Patrol. So on the one hand, to me, the set of images, and this image kind of performs that with the see-through and the gazing back and forth at each other, that you can't ever, like, there's always going to be a human interaction. There's always going to be one-on-one communication, no matter how you build a wall, right? There's always going to have to be, you can't literally wall it off forever and turn it back. And so it points also to that doubling down effect as well.
I love that also, like the kid with the red hood. And I've been very, very conscious of color, especially over the last 3 or 4 months, as I see more, Democrats, for example, or the teachers in Los Angeles co-opting the color red. And so this is kind of like a little MAGA, spot right here on the other side in a kind of subconscious way. So, but otherwise, I guess when you meant talking about the river, I was thinking like, oh, the river Styx. It's like, it's really a haunting picture, and it's meant to be.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So let's move now to our final segment, the pick, where we talk about a photo that, for whatever reason, is makes for good circulation in the news. It's an interesting editorial choice among a lot of different options. It's getting public attention in some way. And here is this week's, you can say, Super Bowl themed pick.
Yeah. The Super Bowl in the NFL is not what it used to be. We're not talking about anything that related. This is on certainly peripheral. It was posted. The photo was posted by Reading Pictures, and the caption reads: "Last night's Super Bowl introduced male cheerleaders for the first time. These images by Brian Fink, who's a wonderful photographer, does a lot of sports, but he's very much shoots in a documentary fashion. These images by Brian Fink show some of the Los Angeles Rams at a preseason game. And of course, this does not show any of the Rams, but the Rams cheerleading squad."
Yeah, I mean, right, the first thing you notice is, gee, there's something different here, right? It's framed up right in the middle of the photo, and it's that we have a man as a member of the cheerleading squad. And, what I love about this picture, kind of visually, that connects to the content, and the choice to hire qualified male dancers to be a part of an NFL cheer team. What I love about it is it's both, there's similarity and difference, right? So it's like, okay, first of all, okay, there's a guy. That is not what we usually see on the NFL sidelines. But on the other hand, he bodily in the use of his movement and gesture, right? He is doing the same thing all the other cheerleaders who are female in this photo are doing. So it raises all of these questions. Why not? It also makes me think, why couldn't they be dressed the way he's dressed, right? If we feel like,
and vice versa.
Right. Yeah. NFL cheerleading, if it's too sexualized, and these people are really hardworking professionals, they're dancers, they're athletes. A lot of the news stories about the male cheerleaders pointed out that, I have male cheerleaders on my college campus, and they are very deeply integrated into, the culture of this form of sports entertainment. So why not? Right. So on the one hand, why couldn't the women be dressed in a jersey and, kind of workout pants? So I don't know. For me, it's just this kind of what's the same, what's the difference? And then how does this it just makes the viewer kind of oscillate back and forth and reflect on that, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it's a step forward that women and men can now be objectified sexually as equals.
Yeah, see, that's interesting, because to me, the way he's dressed actually highlights the athleticism and the movement of the body, as opposed to the sexualization.
Yeah,
at least in this image, I get it, right?
Yeah. So I agree also, and I think it's not quite equal. And what I was thinking is that if he, let's say, was dressed the way they were dressed, or if he had pom-poms, let's say, do you think that they would avoid doing that because it would kind of read more as cross-dressing, or some kind of a, something where it has then a kind of a gay tinge or something? Is that, not to rationalize it, but, there's all kinds of dynamics, at play in terms of something like this.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, that's what, he, at least from a photo, taken in this context, right? It might look different when they're on the field or whatever. So, he's not suited up like an NFL player, but he's dressed in a jersey and pants, which is what the NFL players wear. And so, I think it's about gender norms, and I think it's about expectations, and whether that relates to anxieties about sexuality, especially in the NFL. I think you could certainly ponder that. But to me, what's interesting is the fact that he is performing in the same way that the women are, prompts me at least, as a viewer, to think about, well, how much more athletic and different and maybe strong and professional would the women look if they also put down their pom-poms and if they were wearing a jersey and pants, So again, for me, I think it's just this kind of photo in some ways says more about the person viewing it than maybe the content of the photo itself. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. And then just if we're really, reading one picture, I did not find out how many male cheerleaders there were, the ratio to male to female on the Rams at the game. Maybe it was equal. I don't even know.
Yeah, but I think the Rams have 2 men And I don't think any other teams have men.
Well, then the ratio is certainly also something to think about in this photograph. Very much so. It makes him like, it does feel like tokenism in a way, from a gender perspective, that way also. Yeah.
So, but I didn't watch the Super Bowl, but it also sounds like anything that was happening in the rest of the Super Bowl might have been more interesting than the game, which sounds like it was kind of slow. Sorry, Patriots fans.
Well, sex takes people's minds off violence too, so.
Yeah, maybe there's that way to think about it as well. Yeah. So that is us for this week.
Yeah. We'll be back next week. There's a lot heating up now with politics. We've got border wall showdown coming up. A lot going on with investigations in the House side. So and of course all the things that we're not anticipating that will be coming our way, I'm sure.
Yeah, they will inevitably pop up. So thanks for checking us out, and we will see you next time.
Take care.